Buried beneath the oldest mountains in the east are river systems that vanish into the ground with no maps. Entire towns erased from county records, but still alive in family memory. And a federal survey deliberately left incomplete on purpose. Most people reduce Appalachia to coal mines, poverty, and one scenic overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway. They've seen the postcard. Underneath it sits territory so strategically unmapped that federal agencies still won't publish what's down there. By the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why mapping this region fully would force decisions nobody in power wants to make. Number 18. Rivers that vanish on maps. Limestone Fork Lost Section, Pike County, Kentucky. A major Appalachian river vanishes from federal maps during certain seasons, which means the correct map depends entirely on when you draw it. The Limestone Fork flows through Pike County, and in one 4-mile stretch, the water simply disappears into limestone. Picture driving beside a river you can see, then passing a dry creek bed where the marked channel used to be. The water hasn't stopped. It's running underground, in passages nobody has charted. USGS surveys in the 1990s confirmed the disappearance. They also found something stranger: water gains exceeding rainfall by 20%, fed by subsurface networks that cross county lines. Karst Geology explains the broad mechanism: caves, sinkholes, underground channels. But which aquifers feed that water? And where it resurfaces downstream stays open. The river exists on some maps and vanishes from others, depending on the season you check. Appalachia's rivers refuse to stay filed. Number 17. A hollow erased from record. Elkhorn Hollow, Pike County, Kentucky. A settled community shows up on maps before 1900 and in church records and family Bibles. Then it vanishes completely from Pike County's official registries in 1891. No explanation given. Walk the hollow today and foundation stones still mark where houses stood. A cemetery is kept up by descendants who had to leave. The county deed books for those years simply stop. Not lost, documented as missing. Coal companies relocated Appalachian communities all the time through standard channels. Elkhorn wasn't relocated. It was erased administratively. The hollow held both white and mixed-race families with tangled property titles. Harder to settle than to simply remove from the record. County clerks confirm the gap. Family genealogies prove residence, but official Appalachia has no memory of Elkhorn between 1891 and 1920. Some places weren't removed from the land. They were removed from the map while people still lived there. Number 16. Forest land with no purpose. Daniel Boone. National Forest, unmapped sections, Clay County, Kentucky. Sections of federal forest land carry no official designation, no management plan, and no stated purpose, yet they're patrolled, monitored, and closed off. Walk into one of these zones, and you'll find monitoring equipment and restricted signage serving a function the Forest Service never explains. National forests usually get clear designations: timber, recreation, conservation. Parts of Daniel Boone have none. Federal documents chalk it up to historical complexity or call it pending review. Yet these sections receive steady funding and active management, inconsistent with land that's supposedly unmanaged. The infrastructure hints at environmental research or sensitive species protection. The real function stays administratively invisible. Rangers won't confirm what's being watched or why access stays limited past dusk. The pattern repeats across other unnamed tracts in the same forest, tracts large enough to appear on satellite images but absent from public land use records. If the purpose were simple, someone would have written it down by now. Number 15. A student the records erased. Turner Schoolhouse, Harlan County, Kentucky. A one-room schoolhouse trapped 12 students and a teacher during a documented 1952 snowstorm. The attendance register for that day lists 13 people present. Only 12 names ever appear on any official enrollment record. The registers sit in county archives today, fully legible. The gap was never investigated. Rural schools were loosely documented, and families moved, often for work. That explains some inconsistencies. It doesn't explain this one, a name that appears with a date and a time, then vanishes from every record that followed. Maybe a clerical error, maybe a child whose legal status county officials chose not to document, maybe someone whose permanent record was deliberately withheld. The local historical society keeps the discrepancy on file without an answer. Some people in Appalachia were subtracted from the record while they were still standing in the room. Number 14. Maps that dispute the highest peak. Clingman's Dome, territorial boundary. Sevier County, Tennessee. Appalachia's highest point sits where state maps, federal maps, and Cherokee territorial records tell three different stories about who claims the summit. Clingman's Dome's elevation, 6,643 feet, is settled fact. The territory around it isn't. Cherokee maps from the 1700s place the summit in a different administrative category than modern state lines allow. Colonial land grants describe the same ground in terms that contradict later state claims. Rather than resolve the conflict, cartographers over the centuries simply used whichever map served whoever was drawing it. What's left is an archive of disagreement, visible only if you compare maps across time. Stand on the ridge where surveyors marked one boundary and park officials drew another, and you're standing on solid geology wrapped in unresolved history. Appalachia's highest point is contested by borders nobody ever fully settled. Number 13. A road that leads to nothing. Old Trace Creek Road, Owsley County, Kentucky. A county road runs 12 miles through narrowing valleys and ends at a clearing with one modern utility building. Nothing else. It's on county infrastructure maps, not on GPS or tourism systems. The county maintains it at real expense, and no one in local government can say exactly why. Old roads across Appalachia used to serve mines and timber camps. This one doesn't connect to any of that. The clearing holds no ruins, no former settlement. The building is modern and unmarked. Locals call it backcountry access and can't say access to what. The likeliest answer, it connects to federal or military land management zones that never made it onto public maps. Whatever the building serves, monitoring, research, something classified, the road exists to reach a place that isn't supposed to show up when you search for it. Number 12. Graves divided, never declared. Double Forks Baptist Cemetery, Harlan County, Kentucky. A cemetery splits perfectly along a racial line that county records insist was never official policy. Walk it and you'll see the eastern section and the western section divided by a single tree line. Same decades, same family structures on both sides. No fence was ever built. The separation is total anyway. Appalachian segregation was real, but it rarely fits the mainstream picture of the region. This cemetery looks, at a glance, like two ordinary family plots. Church minutes and cemetery records say otherwise. The divide was enforced socially, never in writing. Nobody had to declare it. Everyone buried there knew which side was theirs. This pattern shows up in dozens of Appalachian cemeteries. Erasing the paperwork made it easier later to claim the segregation was milder than it was. The ground remembers a boundary nobody had to draw. The visible layer is finished. We've traced roads that avoid, rivers that vanish, and communities erased from the record. But hidden Appalachia isn't missing from the world. It's missing from the maps we're told to trust. What's left runs deeper. Science that won't close, history that won't surface, systems built to stay incomplete on purpose. Number 11. The bird science refuses to name. Appalachian ground nesting warblers, Harlan County, Kentucky, mixed forest. A bird species has bred in Appalachia for generations without ever making it onto the official breeding range maps. The gap exists because official discovery requires paperwork that local observers could never produce. Listen for a bird that locals have known for decades, that early naturalists noted in their own logs, and understand that its absence from the scientific map means the bird is officially described as not being there. Range maps come from published sightings, peer-reviewed observation, and museum specimens. That's the rule. This species only entered the literature once a university researcher ran a formal survey. Before that, sightings by local birders and hunters didn't count, not because they were wrong, but because they lacked institutional weight. Much of Appalachia's biological inventory was never fully documented, because documentation requires credentials that rural observers rarely had. What locals knew for generations didn't count as discovered until someone with a university badge confirmed it. Appalachia holds life that existed the whole time, just not permitted to exist on paper. Number 10. Geology drew the line of wealth. Pine Mountain Thrust Fault, Harlan County, Kentucky to Claiborne County, Tennessee. An invisible fault line running through Appalachia decided where coal deposits sat, which decided which counties got investment, which decided which communities got left behind. The Pine Mountain Thrust Fault marks a boundary between rock layers. One side holds workable coal seams, the other doesn't. Stand on a ridge, and you're walking a line that split viable resource from depleted resource. And almost nobody realizes the fault beneath their boots shaped the whole region's economy above it. Standard history treats coal distribution as a matter of enterprise. Companies found the coal and extracted it. But the coal was never hidden. The fault beneath it decided, long before any company arrived, which territories would accumulate wealth and which would stay marginal. Communities on the resource-poor side got less capital, fewer jobs, less stability, and none of it traces back to the geology in the history books written about them. Appalachia's economic map is largely a geological map, written in stone, older than any settlement, and almost nobody talks about that layer at all. Number 9. A newspaper that skipped years. Harlan Daily Enterprise Archives, Harlan County, Kentucky. A regional newspaper's archive from one specific decade has gaps so consistent they can't be accidental. Scroll the microfilm and you'll find labor disputes, economic reports, crime, full coverage, except for one category of events that vanishes completely during specific years. Those exact years line up with private letters, family records, and oral history describing major events the paper never touched. Newspapers are incomplete by nature. Owners have biases, advertisers have interests, and coverage reflects both. That's normal. What's not normal is a pattern this precise. The Harlan Enterprises gaps aren't random. They match years when other sources confirm something significant happened. Either the paper chose not to print certain categories of news, or someone pulled those editions from the archive later. Nobody can prove which. Researchers who treat old papers as the full story will miss entire chapters of what actually happened here. Some history isn't missing because it was forgotten. It's missing because somebody decided at the time that it shouldn't be printed at all. Number 8. The town that never existed. Confluence, Pike County, Kentucky. A coal company built a settlement in a remote hollow, housed workers there for 2 decades, then wiped away every surface trace. The place shows up in payroll ledgers and family photographs, never on a published map, a county registry, or a federal survey. Walk the site today and the ground still shows unnatural leveling, buried metal, and foundation stones laid out where buildings once stood. Company towns were common across Appalachia, and most of them are documented. Confluence isn't. The company never registered it, never filed for the permits a permanent settlement would require, and never treated it as anything but temporary and off the books. That decision put an entire tier of coal extraction below the reach of any regulator. Workers earning wages from an operation that officially didn't exist, living on land with no legal record of them being there. They were economically real and geographically present. Administratively, they were invisible. Some Appalachian workers spent years in a place the law simply never learned to see. 3 entries left. This is where careful researchers run out of answers, because what's left is older than settlement, deeper than any map, and harder to hold than a fact. Number 7. The archaeology that broke the timeline. Adena Mound Cluster, Pike County, Kentucky. Radiocarbon dating places human occupation and mound building in Appalachia during a period when mainstream prehistory insists the region sat empty. Walk out to earthen mounds rising unnaturally from the terrain, and you're looking at construction from a civilization that supposedly shouldn't have been here. Appalachia was long treated as a gap between 2 major cultural centers, not a settlement zone of its own. Adena mounds are documented across the Ohio Valley. The textbook version of Appalachia has it as marginal territory in between. But mounting archaeological evidence shows continuous occupation here. During periods the textbooks call empty, with villages, trade goods, and burial sites accumulating in the record. The old narrative persists mostly because the new evidence hasn't caught up with public knowledge yet. Appalachian prehistory is being rewritten in real time, just slowly. This wasn't a wilderness gap. It was a lived territory with real settlement patterns. And the reason that history stayed hidden isn't a mystery. It's incomplete fieldwork, still ongoing today. Appalachia's oldest history isn't being uncovered. It's being discovered, which means it was hidden by what we didn't know, not by time itself. Number 6. Water that defies the model. Bluefield Reservoir, Mercer County, West Virginia. A reservoir holds far more water than its visible watershed should provide, and hydrologists don't have a clean answer why. Bluefield Reservoir sits in a valley where the surface geology can't explain its depth or year-round volume, especially through drought. Yet, the water stays. Visit during a dry season, and it holds levels other regional lakes simply can't match, fed by something no visible stream accounts for. A 1990s USGS survey found the reservoir gaining 15 to 20% more water than rainfall and known inflow could explain. Nobody located the source. Appalachian karst geology, caves, sinkholes, and underground channels connects groundwater across county lines in ways that are only partly mapped. This lake likely taps into one of those unmapped networks, water moving through passages nobody's charted, possibly originating in territory nobody's claimed. The survey documented the anomaly. It didn't resolve it. The lake stays fuller than it should because the underground map is bigger than the surface one, and that map is still missing pieces. Number 5. Lights locals keep reporting. Ridge lights phenomenon, Southern Appalachian region. For generations, people across these mountains have watched lights they can't explain, pale glows that appear on certain ridges at night, drift, sometimes split, sometimes vanish the moment someone gets close. It's a pattern reported up and down the Appalachians, most famously as the Brown Mountain lights in the Blue Ridge, documented well enough that the USGS actually investigated. The explanations offered over the decades range from headlights refracting through humid air to swamp gas to plain misidentification. Some hold up, in some cases. None. Close the file completely, partly because people were reporting these lights before cars and trains existed to blame. This isn't a ghost story. It's a gap between witness testimony and official dismissal that keeps reopening itself. Families who've lived in these hollows for generations report the same lights in the same places, decade after decade, and the confident debunkings keep coming up one detail short. Science named the phenomenon. It hasn't explained it. Number 4. A forest preserved in stone. Fossil beds and ancient ripple marks. Eastern Appalachian bedrock. The rock under these mountains holds a record almost too old to picture. The ranges here are some of the oldest on Earth, and the stone that built them was laid down in ancient seas and rivers hundreds of millions of years before the mountains themselves ever rose. Find the right exposed rock face, and you can read that vanished world directly. Ripple marks from a shoreline that dried up before complex life crawled onto land. Mud cracks frozen mid-formation, the texture of a seafloor nobody has walked in 500 million years. Geologists use these surfaces to reconstruct environments that existed before there were trees, before there were bones, before almost anything you'd recognize as alive. What's still debated is the full story of how these ancient layers got folded, stacked, and shoved into the range that exists today. A slow-motion collision compressed into stone still not completely mapped in its detail. You're not standing on a mountain when you're up there. You're standing on the pressed flat memory of a world that ended long before the dinosaurs began. And the deepest map of Appalachia isn't drawn on paper. It's written in rock. Number 3. A river that changes its name. New river name change, Mercer County, West Virginia. The New River, one of Appalachia's major waterways, changes its official name partway through its own course, a boundary that has nothing to do with geography and everything to do with old colonial claims still shaping the region today. Picture floating the same water, through the same rock, under the same sky, and crossing an invisible line where the name on the map changes, and so does the legal jurisdiction underneath you. Rivers rename at state borders all the time. That's normal administrative geography. What's not normal is that these particular boundaries trace back to colonial-era land grants and jurisdiction claims that predate the state of West Virginia itself. The naming still shapes law, property rights, recreation access, and environmental management today. Float downstream and you can cross from one legal regime into another without the water changing at all. Appalachia runs on jurisdictional lines that lost their political weight generations ago, but never stopped shaping how the land gets managed. Some of the region's most important boundaries exist only on paper, written centuries before anyone alive today was born. Number 2. Groundwater. No one will map. Appalachian groundwater systems, multi-state region. Beneath Appalachia sits a groundwater system of unknown total size, unknown full extent, and unknown interconnection. A freshwater resource so large that hydrologists confirm it exists, while federal agencies have never fully mapped it. That's not an oversight. Complete mapping would force decisions about extraction rights, contamination limits, and resource allocation that would pit coal operations, agriculture, industry, and public water systems against each other, with nowhere left for any of them to hide. Hydrologists map discrete sections, recharge rates here, water quality readings there. What's missing is the full three-dimensional picture: how these systems connect, how much water actually exists, where it can be safely drawn without draining somewhere else dry. That complete map has never been assembled, and not by accident. As long as the aquifer stays partially unmapped, no single authority can be forced to make it fully public. No agency has to set final extraction limits. No region can claim priority over another. The largest freshwater resource in eastern North America stays deliberately unfinished on paper, because finishing the map would force distribution decisions that are politically radioactive. This is close to a blueprint for the whole video, a system too large, too valuable, and too contested to ever be allowed to sit fully mapped. Number 1. The cave maps no one made. Appalachian unmapped passages, multi-county region, eastern Kentucky. Deep in eastern Kentucky runs a cave system so extensive that speleologists openly admit parts of it stay unsurveyed on purpose. Not because reaching those passages is impossible, because a complete map would force federal decisions no agency wants to make. This isn't Mammoth Cave itself, it's the network that connects to it, extends past it, and reaches into territory where a full inventory would expose water sources tangled up in existing mining permits, species habitat that would require legal protection, and archaeological material that could rewrite how we understand Appalachian settlement. The known sections are public. Cavers have documented and published miles of passage. But the boundaries of the unmapped sections, the true scope of the underground water systems, and the full biological inventory of cave-dependent species stay incomplete in federal records, and stay that way by choice. Speleologists talk about unexplored sections the way people talk about weather, like it's just a fact of the landscape. It isn't. Completing that map would force the government to designate protection zones, restrict extraction, and possibly reclaim mining permits already issued on incomplete hydrological data. This cave system is managed, in part, through deliberate not knowing. That's not a conspiracy. It's how bureaucracies avoid conflict. You can't be forced to protect what you've fully mapped, and you can't privatize what officially isn't mapped at all. Appalachia has been left partly unexplored because staying unexplored is useful. It avoids lawsuits. It avoids hard choices. It keeps everyone's options open. The biggest open question in Eastern North America isn't buried in mystery. It's sitting in plain sight. Inside the territory, federal agencies quietly agreed never to finish mapping. Appalachia isn't unmapped because it's hidden. It's unmapped because staying incomplete is useful to whoever manages it. Tell us in the comments about the one near you. The holler, the ridge, the stretch of road, locals know, but the map refuses to admit. Subscribe to keep tracking the territories being kept incomplete, and watch the next investigation right there on screen.